Today I'm going to be making a forget-me-not wreath cake. It's going to be a marble cake. I'm going to begin the process by putting some buttercream icing down on my cake board and placing the first layer onto the board. I am adding some plain vanilla buttercream icing in between the layers. So I will begin by smoothing out that icing so that I can place the second layer on top of that. And this will help secure that and also add that deliciousness of buttercream icing to the cake. So I'm going to begin by adding the second layer of cake to this cake. You'll see that I'm putting the top of the cake down. There is a lot of space in between the first and second layer. I did opt not to level out this cake because the person receiving this cake does love icing. So this will give the opportunity for there to be lots of icing. But I will use the buttercream icing to fill in the gap between those the two layers of the cake. So I'm just smoothing out the buttercream icing. I'm going to try to get some pretty crisp edges. Here I'm just beginning to use some of that excess coming down over the sides to put into the gap that's left by those two not level cake layers. And I'm beginning to add now with my piping bag some buttercream to fill in the opening between those two layers. And I'll use that icing then to do the crumb coating to keep those crumbs from getting into the top layer of my design. So I'm going to use my icing knife to smooth those sides. Sometimes I use a bench scraper, other times I use this knife, and either one of those works just fine. It just depends on what kind of mood I'm in to decide which one of those two tools I will use. In between doing my crumb coat and my top coat of icing, I will often put my cakes into a chiller or a freezer just to harden up that icing, which I think helps to smooth out the icing in between the two layers of icing, and also it helps to get some of those air bubbles out. So to do that, I will take the metal tool that I'm using, whether it's a bench scraper or this knife, and I'll just run it under some hot water. This is what I'm doing here now. I'll run it under some hot water and then dry it off, and then I'll use the heat from the metal that came from the water, and I will use that to help smooth this icing out. And that really helps to make the icing look much smoother than without that process. You'll see how much smoother it looks now compared to when I first did it. You'll also notice that where it's needed, I will add additional icing to fill in any gaps or to fill in any indentations that might be present. Like right there, I just added some more, and then I'll just continue to smooth this cake. So sometimes you see videos and it looks like this is a super quick process, but it's not. It does take some time to really work to make this icing smooth. And I tend not to work to make it 100% smooth. I like a little bit of character, but not to be 100% with texture. Here you'll see that I am using some purple or violet icing. I'm trying to get just some color on top of the cake. I'm going to be doing a forget-me-not wreath design, and I just want the inside of that wreath to have a mix of purple and white to show through the back of that wreath. So I'm going to take a bench scraper here and just kind of work to blend those two colors together a little bit. I don't want them to mix completely together, but just to marble a little bit, smoothing that out a little bit so that when the wreath is done, you'll see some color in the background. Just spinning the cake board as I am trying to pull some of that excess off. Like I said, I just want some color to pop through the back of that wreath. Now you'll see I'm using a Wilton number 4 tip, and I'm just taking some chocolate brown icing, taking it in a circle around the entirety of the top of that cake to make a wooden wreath look. And I'm making it so that it's not completely even. I want the branches to kind of be uneven and to look like they kind of cross each other, so it's not going the same direction every time, just so it looks like an actual wooden wreath. And I'm gonna, instead of doing your typical shell bottom, your border, I am just going to put some purple large dots, and then I'm going to use a tool and just kind of pull upward in the center of that dot to kind of bring a textured design. And then I'm going to kind of go in between those dots, and I will pull up even more to give it this look that you're seeing now. Of course, I did that through the entirety of the bottom of the cake, pulling it mostly to the top of the cake, but leaving some white to the top, white at the top, so that you see both the white and the purple. And I really like this textured design instead of it being completely smooth. There were points, as you just saw, I did have to wipe it off so that there wasn't a lot of excess purple. Now what you see is I'm using a piping nail, and I'm using the Wilton 104 tip to make some 4 and 5 petal forget-me-not flowers. Here's what they look like. And I'm going to add some white pearls. Here's what that looks like. And I did put them into the freezer for a bit to chill those so that I would be able to pick them up pretty easily and put them onto that wreath that we just created. Using a pair of tweezers to place these pearl sprinkles into the center of each of the forget-me-not flowers. And after pulling them out of the freezer, I am just taking those and placing those onto the wreath periodically. Not all of them in one place, but I have them in 2 separate places. I had made some little petals that I was going to try to place, but I ended up not liking how they looked. I did place one and then saw that I wasn't a big fan of how that looked, and so I ended up just placing another forget-me-not flower on top of where I had placed that little petal that I had just placed there. And I used those little scissors, those flower scissors, to push them down a little bit into the branch icing to secure them. Now I'm beginning to use a leaf tip, and I am adding some leaves to each or a few of the forget-me-not flowers, just to give more pop of color to this design. This was a pretty simple design, but I think that it looks pretty elegant. I did really enjoy creating this design. Now I'm adding just some of those same pearl sprinkles that I used on the flowers into the center of that cake. And after I finish that, you'll see the final product. I really appreciate having you join me for this design. And if you enjoyed this, I do welcome you to come back to see other designs, and feel free to like, subscribe, and share. Hope you have a wonderful day.